Welcome to the Water is Life podcast, where we discover how to flow from feeling dry, stuck, stagnant, and dehydrated to feeling juicy, crystal clear, and quenched. Because water is life, and getting to know water is life-changing. I invite you to surf the deep mysteries of our liquid source of life, from practical health strategies to philosophical explorations of water as a vessel of consciousness, so that you can experience the empowerment of being a living body of water starting today. Are you ready? Grab a glass of water and let's dive in. Before we get our feet wet with this week's topic, make sure you're subscribed so you always get the current episode. And if you take a minute to write a review, this helps others to find this wellspring of hydrating wisdom too. I pour out my thanks to you for taking the time to water this podcast so it can grow by sharing your review. Well, Kalani, it is an honor and a pleasure to get to be here with you today. Thank you so much for joining the podcast to share your wisdom with our audience. And I would love to start by asking a bit of your background. Can you share with everyone where you come from, who you are, and what it was like growing up in such a water-reverent culture?
Oh, hey, thank you. And such a pleasure to see you and be here. And so my name is Kalani Souza, M. Kalani, but the M's kind of silent. Right? There's a lot of Kalani. It's like saying Joe in Hawaii, but in all honesty, it's normally just a portion of the name. More recently, it becomes a name, but in my case, Kalani is a line of people, right? It's a line of leadership within our family line. So our family line is part of the koko. It's called our family, which is interesting because the word means blood, those of the blood, the koko. And my particular family line is called Ualani, which means the reign of heaven. So Kalani means of heaven, right? So they say the thing that came from heaven, the gift from heaven. And it means the same thing that Hebrew means when they say the name Matthew, hence the M on the front of my name, right? As America seizes control of Hawaii post-World War II, they actually give everyone English names. Right? The language becomes illegal, all of this kind of political stuff that humans do. And so I end up with a tricky name, right? And my actual name, which we rarely share, and we don't share, because of issues of spiritual cleansing, right? We keep our initiating names to ourselves. It's sort of like our reverence of the great creation, right? We call it Akua is your back. Right? And Akua then means whatever is behind all of this. So it's like, it's a way of you and I don't have to fight about the element of creation, right? It is clearly there. And whatever it is that's going on behind all this reality that we perceive in these lower vibrations, there's something else. There's something else happening behind all of this evidence, right? And that brings me to our understanding of water, right? We think water is one of the great clues of what is happening behind all of this, right? It's like we look for the interaction of the creator, of the creation entity with these dimensions, with these understandings. Right. So it's interesting because from our religious perspective in the culture that I grew up in, which by the way, everyone is Hawaii. I don't know if that's obvious. Indigenous native people tend to look like they come from everywhere, but mostly Mexico City. Right. So because we're all kind of relatives, a world gone by where we all sort of look like this, like mixed puppies. And many of us believe that world is coming again, right? Where all the people are blended and we all look like mixed puppies and we're running around. And so that world of Hawaii is a place. It's not a race, right? The early Kanaka, early natives, as identified by the Europeans, were already a mixed bag of tricks, right? They were already a mixed race. The island is made up of whoever shipwrecked here. Right? It's 2,000 miles from anywhere. Right? If you were lucky enough that your ship actually made it, whatever log you were floating on actually rolled up on the beach, it's like, fine. And the first thing you look for is water. How ironic, right? That here you are adrift on nothing but water. And you reach this tiny little spit of survivable ground, 1,000 miles from anywhere. Right? Not even sure how you got there because the sail broke 5 days ago. and you've been adrift since the storm. And here are these mountains rising up out of the sea, and you're getting cast up on the beach. And it's like, whoa, right? And the first thing is water, right? And that was the thing about Hawaii, because if you've been out in the Pacific to the islands, water is rare. Water is a scarcity, right? The rain clouds come and you hope for the blessing of rain, right? It's like you hope, you pray, and you wish for the rain to come and fill the pot and fill the lake, or the pond, because you're on this Pacific island. So there's no great major river running by, right? Without the Sky Father and the interaction with the sea, the woman that is the sea, Moana, Ikinui. Without that chemical play between the sky and the sea that we call the water cycle, you have nothing. No plants, no trees, no. So it's understandable that from a faith-based perspective, or from a deep desire to be in relationship with the natural world, you would reach out, and you would reach out that way, right? Towards that thing that you see that brings you life. That would become the critical pinnacle, right? The motivation, as it were, for all of your existence is there in the clouds and there in the ocean, and you're watching the evaporative cycle and it's moving, right? So, not to be a bore, but starting at the beginning, in the Kane tradition, one of the 4 directions of our cosmology, the Western direction, which is why we begin the day at sunset. Our days begin at sunset. There's only a couple of cultures that happens with, right? And so we watch the setting of the sun and the rising of the stars, right, into the night sky. So the night we call the Po, P-O. And this Po is the darkness of space. Not just the stars, but more importantly, that blackness that's in between, right? It's like, to us, in the darkness, all things are, right? It's like the black is holding all the colors, right? The white is reflecting all the colors, right? But the black is holding all the colors, right? And creating it. So we see the creative principle in this binary sense activated between the creator and creation, right? The creator, as we sense it, is not the creation, right? The creator is the thing behind all the creation. It's like, right, what is back there that's making all this go, right? But this is creation, right? This is feminine. This is the goddess, right? It's like we're sitting inside the feminine principle, right? We see the creation principle as being masculine, but it's like the spark and the spark plug that makes your engine go. The car is actually feminine, right? It's like the engine's actually feminine. That spark might be masculine, right? Okay, got it. You need that, get that engine turned over. But once that's done, the spark plug is just got to sit in there going, and it has to do it at a regular basis. The way the sun comes up in the morning, on a regular basis. We consider that the real masculine sort of elemental thing. We think of masculine energy as being really predictable, right? It's like, sit there and look at it. It's going to do the same thing every time, right? It's like you offer it the same stimulus, it's going to react the same way. It's pretty simple principles to understand once you understand the masculine, approach to thing. And then that masculinity is within a particular quantity, within that living person, right? The X amount of that masculinity, which at times gets confused for toxicity, and I think it does because of the influence that it asserts, the space it takes up in the room. That's the nature of it, taking up space. But all of it, as we say, driven by the creator, trying to understand the creation. There's an old Taoist thing in the Tao Te Ching, I think, where they say, understand the masculine, but stick to the feminine, because that's the way it operates. So you take the time to see and understand that one principle, while you actually act and operate and interpret to another principle. And then understanding the difference in that, the need for one. And that's the water element. And I know I need to back up to the Po and get this going again. So we call the Po, the darkness of space, the great grandmother of creation. Her name is Po Uli, right? And Uli as kind of a nickname, like grandma, right? And it means the creation, and it comes forward. And in our cosmology, the great moment of creation is the coming of Kane, which is like the fire of creation, breaks through the darkness, right? And Kane is also our word for masculine, right? Hina is our word for feminine, and so we say Mahina, it belongs to the feminine. And that's our name for the moon. It belongs to the feminine. Mahina, right? Na meaning belonging to, and Ma means belong to. Like you look up at that woman that you came out of her uterus and you go, Ma, right? It's that kind of belonging, right? The moon belongs to the women and the goddess. And you can see it in the water cycle that is the feminine cycle of reproduction. So the grandmother coming from the darkness of space, we say, comes trapped in the pole. So our temples are made of stone, and the important standing rock is called the Hakukane. And it stands for this rock, this stone that is alive because of the water in it. There's water in this rock, and within this water is the small seeds of life. So we believe that out of the Po, out of the darkness of space, came all these little rocks with tiny drops of water. And they started coalescing and collecting and cooling into this giant ball shaped like a coconut. And the compression squeezed the water to the surface. And it became the ocean, right? The mineralization through the rocks and the water became the ocean. And we call that ocean Moana, the woman that is the sea. To us, that ocean is reincarnated great-granddaughter of the darkness of the sky. So it's talking about the flow of femininity from the darkness of creation to the making of the sea, right? And it passes through the grandmother moon and the earth mother, the correlation of the earth mother, and then the squeezing out of this water that is the daughter of the earth mother. And what they're talking about really is the chondria line, the idea that descendancy moves along through the women, right? And is all of life and becomes the sea that covers, from our perspective, most of the earth. So in our culture, the ocean, the water, does not separate us as people. It connects us. When we stand on the shore, we have a completely different experience of what the sea is doing, right? Than the European makers who are like, the boundary ends here. We were like, are you kidding us? The boundary begins there, right? It's like, it's the opposite, right? That's where the water is. And that's where we began as life so long ago, traveling out of the darkness of space and coming here and slowly becoming this single cell coral polyp, and then progressing on to become this wondrous being that is holding part of the creator in them and trying to understand the universe, right? Trying to understand the goddess and the creation, right? Reaching back to understand what the creation is doing, right? And how it's doing it. And this is all within the water cycle. So it has some interesting impacts culturally in the way we see the story. Right, so we see the grandmother moon. We consider her really a big part of the water cycle and how things are happening here on the planet. And we think, unlike the sun that comes up every morning, right, the moon is always in a different place, always, for 8 years and 6 months. And then it's back in the same place it was 8 years ago and 6 months ago, right? But most people don't know that, right? They look up every night, they think, yeah, there's the moon. But sometimes the moon is there in the morning, sometimes it's there in the evening, right? Sometimes it doesn't come out till midnight, but it comes out really bright, right? And sometimes it comes out at noon and you miss it because the sun is overhead. You weren't looking at the horizon. The grandmother moon is so feminine, right? She has a different mood every day. There's something else going on. And like most women in your life, you should pay very close attention, right? Because those subtle changes are telling you things about your life, about the cycle, right? The grandmother moon is always watching you 24 hours a day, right? She was there the day you were born. She will be there on the day you leave. It's like your whole experience here. She's part of the family you were never without. And she's watching over the water, of which you are 92% molecularly at a minimum if you're not hydrating, right? And if you're hydrating, it's way better. So you are predominantly the water, as most plants are, as most of the water cycle, and you are subject to the ton wave asserted by the grandmother moon, to the movements. So the nighttime sky, where the great grandmother in the darkness of space with the stars, and the grandmother moon moving through that space, to us is the future. When the sun sets, existence. You can choose any star you want to navigate by, right? The billions of possibilities are right there, the future right there for you to choose, right? Which star is your fancy? Which direction will you set out on, right? What will be your individuated experience and your decision as you explore the universe? But when the sun comes up, when that masculine entity enters, we consider it the past. Now here's the star that we're all steering by, right? It's daytime. This is the decision that was made. We really have no choice. Here's the star that's running our lives in this little orb. It's coming this way. The other stars, the possibilities, they're still there. They're behind this light in sort of a strange masculine way. It's too bright and taking up way too much space in the sky, but forgivable. Right? It's like it's going to have a duration and then it's going to go down. And you know how we know? Because it does that every evening. The sun sets and the grandmother night and the stars return and the possibilities are there yet again. And we know that things change. The bowl of light and the bowl of day moving over us are predictable, are predicting our lives, right? They give us clues. So what the sky is doing, the sky father, you notice how certain elements in our cosmology have a masculine perspective and other elements have a feminine perspective, and we divide that up by the water or what is making the water have action, right? One of them is motivating through its energy. The other one is the element, right? There's really a fundamental kind of understanding of the duality and the dynamic of it. So in watching the world, observing the natural phenomena, the phenology occurring, the culture develops a science, right? An indigenous science by observing and modeling and watching the hydrocycle, which we call to observe that movement, that predictability. So I was raised in the old Hawaiian culture as a manu boy. That's somebody who works in the farming, the taro farming, and the fields. But the manu boy specifically is the one who's tasked with keeping the river flowing.
Friends, are you thirsty for spring water in its purest, wildest form, untouched by chemicals or processing? But maybe you don't have a nearby spring where you can harvest your own? We've got you covered with Alive Waters. They deliver fresh, raw, unprocessed spring water straight from a pristine, natural primary spring right to your doorstep. This water is wild and undomesticated, just like nature intended, packed with minerals and full of life force energy. And the best part? It's delivered in stunning, eco-friendly Flower of Life glass bottles designed to energize the water even further with sacred geometry. Delivery is available in Austin, San Antonio, Miami, San Francisco, LA, Portland, and New York. If you're not in one of those areas, no worries, you can still order their beautiful Flower of Life glassware from anywhere. Just head over to waterislife.shop for all the details and use the code WaterIsLife for 15% off your order.
With keeping the water moving cleanly to everyone's field, not just to your families, but to everyone in the village, to be responsible to clean that river. You call them manu boy because in the upland, all the birds are there in the trees. And so you spend all your time with the manu, with the birds up in the trees, up in the forest, cleaning the river, making sure you take out the debris, or if some animal accidentally dies near the river, or something is there that could cause dis-ease further down the water chain, you remove it. So that journey every morning up to the head source of the water and then back down to the farmlands where the water is distributed it is taught to you. I began when I was 7. It's taught to you as a metaphor, a physical living metaphor of the creation process that we're experiencing. So my grandfather says to me, we watch the water cycle, the sky father interacting with the woman that is the sea, right? And the evaporative cycle and the making of the clouds far off on the ocean and moving towards the island. And then we watch the individuated come down onto the mountaintop. We call that ua, the rain. Ua. right? It's like meaning discovery. U is a Hawaiian word. It means here physically, right? Here present in time. U, right? It's like the rain, right? To be here physically, to give the possibility of life and discovery, right? So these are how Hawaiian words are shaped. They're sort of like the early Proto-Polynesian language is developed right after, maybe at the same time as Sanskrit. And so it's this it's single monosyllable based. It really reflects the expression of the individual, meaning discovery or, the beginning of something, because that's what we say. Go, that's what that is, right? It's like start honing the language. So, the rain on the mountain. Well, that could metaphorically be each one of us being born as an individual raindrop and beginning our journey through the little puddles of our family, right? And then soon the rivulet of our education, and suddenly the lakes of our vocation and our chosen profession. And sometimes the little drop gets caught up in a tiny little pool, and stagnant. Begins to pick up some real negative energy. We notice the only thing that seems to help is a big old storm, that flushes the water and gets that raindrop moving along again. So, maybe sometimes we welcome those tears. We welcome that storm. That comes to move us from a place in our life where we may have gotten a little stagnant in the journey. And, we are afraid of that storm, but that storm is coming for a reason. And ever the water is seeking its own level. Right. And ever and always that little drop is slowly making its way to the sea. It's inevitable that whether it passes through the ground and out of spring, or it moves along the surface or evaporates and comes out again, that little drop is going to make its way to the sea, is going to join again with the reincarnated great-grandmother and be part of the all. To be at some point to the Sky Father, right? To begin the journey again, right? To learn those lessons again. So that's one of the cosmological takes, the cycle of the rain. We call the affair between the Sky Father and the woman that is the sea, right? The younger generation of his consort, the Earth Mother. So grandmas would tell you the other lesson is once you get married, don't let your kid sister move into the house, right? Because it's, Sky Father, right? That's the way the grandmothers would talk about it. Now, here's an interesting note. In Hawaiian culture, the men's genital is called uli, which is the nickname of the great-grandmother, the darkness of space, right? And I remember being about 9 years old, and I'm in the kitchen with my Auntie Keala, and I'm like, how come we're calling that the great-grandmother, right? It's like, are you kidding me? It's like, surely there is some other name for this. And she says, no, the grandmother will do. And I said, why? Why is that? She said, because one day a goddess will come along in your life. And we don't know what form she'll take, but she'll come along in your life and she'll tell you what to do with that thing. So until then, stop touching it. I was like 9 years old. I was like, okay, got it. Auntie Keala, right? And she's like, okay. So very interesting the way the women weave the language and tell the stories, right? And like the thing I said about the Sky Father and, the dubious nature of men, right? It's like the way. So I grew up in an old Hawaiian culture, but was fortunate even within that culture to grow up with the women, the elder women, to be allowed to sit with them. And it was it was a pleasure. They did not do that with everyone. So even today, I will enter a house and gravitate towards the kitchen. You sit down on a stool and it's like, it's where that is all occurring. Where the care and the nurturing and the preparation of the food and the talk of community and of sharing the water. And I think it's because I was the Manu boy. They were like, you need to understand the importance of the responsibility we give you in the morning. It is not, you don't wake up, don't do it and tell us you did. It's like that. There will be consequences for that. And it's like, yes. And, I'm going. And it's like that idea of reverence to this group of women that spend their lives. I mean, I don't even remember them sleeping, right? They spend their lives like caretake for everyone, for the village, for everyone's children is considered a child of theirs in this circle of women that really look after the crops, talk about dividing up the fish and feeding the elderly and those who, are less fortunate. I mean, it's real in that old village life. And I remember coming to Honolulu, the city, the thing of modernity. I remember crying walking into a grocery store for the first time. Like, I could not believe there was that much food in one location. Are you kidding me? Who owns this? He must be king of the world, right? It's like, this is amazing, right? Only to find that kind of consumption over the decades could lead us to this precarious position we're in right now, where we regard the natural world, which is fundamentally driven by the water cycle, we regard that as a resource, not as a relative, right? And it's like, and we move through the world in a transactional way rather than a relational way. But the water doesn't do that, right? The water seeks its own level. The water treats us all with equity. You know what I mean? The water is big enough to hold all of it. And the water is so tricky. I mean, hydrogen has got to be the creative element of the universe and so explosive, right? So much energy in those tiny little plonks inside that little, proton. And you go like, wow, that thing is the basis for all of the light that we see in the universe. And helium is only the spent hydrogen, right? And then you take oxygen, which again, another incredibly flammable element, right? Incredibly volatile. We need to be cautious as we handle it. Too much oxygen, which the Earth had, 2 billion years ago, up to about 295 million years ago, right? Too much oxygen and we can't exist. Other life forms like insectoids, and their development through that sort of inhaling through the thorax, that they do great, right? In that atmosphere, 12-foot dragonflies, right? That whole thing, but not us, not little hominids, right? We come along later. But we come along. Creation has a plan for us. We are here within the cycle of the water. And perhaps more importantly, we seem to be investigating the water. We seem to want to know about the water. Something is calling us in that direction. Could it be the water? Could something be driving us all to understand our place in the cosmology, how it fits? We're understanding some interesting things, right? We have this great desire to go back into space, back into, other realms and possibilities. And yet we know from our science that our biology, carbon-based, is very anchored to this planet. We're very much a part of this planetary biology. We don't even do good in zero gravity, right? Octopi would do great in zero gravity, right? It's like they're almost engineered and designed to be in space with the multiple arms and the intelligence and the ability to move and self-project and self-break, which we do not have. Our structure is not like that. And yet I've had an experience with them where I see the divinity, the divine consciousness reaching to understand, same as us, right? It's like that same consciousness. For whatever reason, along this universal journey, you and I have here in this moment together in our water, interacting with each other and all that surrounds within the water bubble, within this water cycle. It is driven by some kind of decom, way too large for me to understand, right? And yeah, in my worst moments, I might sit there with a dry martini and, a dirty martini, depending on my mood, right? And look out over the horizon and try to interpret my place in the cosmos. And then I put the drink down and I go make dinner for everybody, right? Because there's a reality to our existence that includes the relationships we have directly within our orbits. And we tend to disregard those relationships that are really close to us. Those drops of water that have gathered with us on the journey, right? And we might all do good to really inspect how we're perceived by the people we're directly in contact with in our lives, right? The people we choose to experience this little journey with. For whatever reason, I found that we tend to treat worse the people who are closest to us, right? They tend to see our water churning, when it's out of balance, when we feel like we need to retreat, and they're there for us, they're there to help in the clarity to go, it's okay, right? It's like to soothe it. And somehow, we can learn to disregard that in our ever exalted, journey to understand the great cosmos, right? It's like, what? It's like, how about understanding the deep relationship that's sitting right next to you on the couch watching the movie on Saturday night, right? It's like maybe you could have a conversation, you know what I mean? Instead of just, so all of us have that experience. And what I mean to imply by this is sometimes the tide is high, sometimes the tide is low, but for certain, the tide is always moving and always changing, right? So that's one of the constants we see within not just the universe, but within water and the water cycle. It's constantly changing. It's always the same, right? It's like we can sit on the shoreline and our thoughts drift off, right? And we're watching that motion of the waves and we think, so peaceful. It's always so consistent here on the beach. Really? Just wait 2 hours. The shoreline is completely changed, right? The water's eroded, moved in. It's like through the course of a 24-hour period, that beach does all kinds of things. And somehow we think it's always the beach. And that complex dichotomy, the two really flammable elements coming together and becoming an in element that can support life in all four of the various stages, as solid, as a plasma, as a liquid, as a gas, right? In the four directions of the medicine wheel, and the water is able to survive and create the field of play that allows life to be. So it's a small wonder that looking out over this, like for 2,000, 3,000 years, we begin asking the question, could the hydrogen be the creator? Could the oxygen be the creation responding to the creator, right? Could the water, in fact, be like the presence of the creator-creation element together? And this is why we're always looking for water when we look out into space to find evidence of biological life, is it why it becomes such a clue to how, and if we watch motion, momentum, flow, when we talk in physics, like Nassim and his principles, or, other principles that have been present in the thinking for about 400 years, right? If we're watching the mechanics of it, the water seems to be like a wild card, like when you're playing a game, right? The water's like the joker in the deck, right? It can do almost anything, right? It's like, wow. It's not like the other elements that seem to have limitations, right? It's like, wow, this one just, right? And somehow, I hate to use the word, but it trumps all the others, you know what I mean? And boy, doesn't that explain his actions. Anyway, it's my apologies for that slip. I'm just so amazed by, the conditions we humans find ourselves in. But understanding the binary principle of water, the balance back to the universe, I think as we see the darkness growing amongst us, the light must be shining brighter. The darkness is just more well-defined. When the light is getting this bright, we're just seeing it clearer. So the human experience, like standing on the shoreline as the evening sun set, we could navigate our lives by any star we want to choose, right? We need to remember that, but that we all have that ability to not just experience, but to shape what our experience was and so is, because there's only the present moment of the cosmos. We don't have to experience it in fear. We don't have to experience it, as less than, as the other. We're all within the water. This is a really easy boat ride. Everybody's on the same canoe. So your perceived enemy has to be at the table for dinner with everyone else. You cannot find a solution to this problem that serves only the good people, whatever your perception of that might be. There are people in the world who blame the little hydrogen atom for most of the world's problems today. There are people in the world who think of the little hydrogen atom as the solution to most of the problems in the world today. There are people in the world who don't even know how to spell hydrogen, right? So if we're going to be real about our relationships with each other, then we have to understand that all us belong within this cycle. No one's accidental. We have to stop having disposable human beings that we value only for their tax profit potential and the creation of populations for the borrowing of funds from European banks so we can continue our capitalization and the gluttonous corporate raiding of resources, right? Natural resources. They're not resources. They have lives of their own, right? The olive tree has a life of its own. It's like, what are you talking about? And it freely gives you its fruit. And here you are imprisoning it, turning it into a global industry that we call olive oil. Thanks, Roman farmers, right? It's like, and we jump out and create this global economy that we claim we're in risk of losing if American economics fails. Wow, really? We think that much of ourselves, right? It's like, yeah, America is too big to fail. Not really. Is anybody watching? So if we're in the water, then let's anticipate the need for cleaning the water, for reading our communities around water responsibility, right? You want to identify how to survive. Well, it means feeding your children first. It means caring for the elderly within your community. It means making sure the women are unafraid so they can attend to the business of society. It's like surround them, and in the way that the word originally means, husbandry, provide the necessary tools for them to accomplish what it is they want to accomplish. It's like, be a good partner. It's like, learn to participate in a meaningful way with all of it and stop being king of the hill.
Friends, are you thirsty for spring water in its purest, wildest form, untouched by chemicals or processing, but maybe you don't have a nearby spring where you can harvest your own? We've got you covered with Alive Waters. They deliver fresh, raw, unprocessed spring water straight from a pristine, natural primary spring right to your doorstep. This water is wild and undomesticated, just like nature intended, packed with minerals and full of life force energy. And the best part? It's delivered in stunning, eco-friendly Flower of Life glass bottles designed to energize the water even further with sacred geometry. Delivery is available in Austin, San Antonio, Miami, San Francisco, LA, Portland, and New York. If you're not in one of those areas, no worries, you can still order their beautiful Flower of Life glassware from anywhere. Just head over to waterislife.shop for all the details and use the code WaterIsLife for 15% off your order.
So these frameworks of education, of competition, of here's the gold star, Billy, you did really good, right? These, are you kidding me? Stop it. That is not what the human race is. The human race is a cooperative organism, right? Few of us can walk past a child suffering and not respond. But there's a few, maybe they shouldn't be here anymore, but that's not my call, but most of us have the same response, right? The desire to help immensely, right? Oh, what's wrong, baby? You know what I mean? It's like, boom. We need to feed these better angels of our nature, right? We need to create fields of play where it's okay to have a humanitarian perspective, where it's not okay to say, I think I mean mine and my, sorry, I'd love to help, but I'm just trying to protect my own interests. Wow, that might be the problem right there. Maybe your own interest is actually helping. A lot of us don't understand that till we get to the final breath, what we in Hawaiian call the ha, or the breath of life. Hawai'i. Vai is our word for fresh water. E is our word for here, not just physically, spiritually also. All the unseen, everything that brings the whole thing here. And that's the difference between E and U. U means here, but physically, right? Here, present in the moment. E means here for all time, right? Spiritually, all the unseen and the seen, right? All of it. Ha, here for all time is the water of the breath of life. It's because you shipwreck on that shore and you look up and you cannot believe the amount of fresh water running down the mountains, running down the streams. Anybody who's been to Hawaii, you know what we're talking about. It's like, you're like, oh my God. It's like after weeks of being stranded on a boat adrift in the salt water where you can't drink anything, you wake up suddenly one morning on a shore where there's this abundance of fresh water just like everywhere, moving and greenery and things growing. And it's like, why would you leave? It's like, why would you jump back off into 2,000 miles of, oh my God, am I going to make it anywhere at all? If you were blessed enough to actually reach the island. So if you were the first person, hey, good on you. I hope you enjoy yourself. But if you're about the 400th person, you got to kind of make peace with the other 399 and their descendants who have been there on the island shipwreck before. And that was kind of going on for 700 years. That's the early Hawaiian experience of which my family is part of. So we're a mixed bag of tricks from all over the world that create the place called Hawaii. Here is the water of the breath of life in a deeply spiritual way. So that's almost a way of saying, here is something of such abundance that we could share it with the whole world, that they could see that the planet is a blessing, that the whole world is something that is meant to keep us alive. Imagine how these early people are stranded on a boat for a week or 2 weeks adrift, or how did they get way out here into that sort of northeastern Pacific where there's nothing? And so many of them probably committed themselves to the universal all until they shipwrecked on the shore, right? They were like ready to, and thank you, God, and now, it's like whatever happens, and boom. And then this sort of reward, like here you are, right, in this place that nobody's heard of. There's no snakes, there's no thorns, there's no mountain lions, no coyotes, no bears, no nothing, right? It's like people are like the top of the food chain, right? There's like birds, there's chickens, and they bring some pigs. It's like, wow, you mean I can lay down on the ground? There's no insects that are going to bite me? We don't even have mosquitoes until the English show up with the mosquitoes in the sewage of the boats. And then quite amazing, right? So if you can imagine if you came drifting across the sea thinking here's the end of your life and you shipwreck on these islands, you start to reach out for a meaning. Right? Why did I make it? Why am I still here? What is this place? How did we bump? And all of that stacked on one another, all of that thought, all of that observing the water cycle and the whole thing plays into that sort of cosmological awareness of the grandmother from the depths of space, of how the water cycle is critical to the survival of the world, how all the plants are related to us, and how all of this is one giant cycle. So like I say, early Kanakas view Hawaii as a place, not a race, right? This is like a place that we all end up in. Final word on that too is that breath of life. It's the exhale. Right? Inhale is the point of discovery. We call that right? So your life is kind of an aha moment. It's lived between that first coming out down the canal and that last when you make the transition. So alo is like the front porch of the house. It's like the cover of the book, the alo of the book. It's what comes first. So even this part of the human being, what is presented. But alo, what comes first is that last breath, right? It's like they go, it means hello, goodbye, and I love you. No, it's actually our way of us saying that when you leave, remember what comes first is one day, right? So you live your life in a good way. Aloha, right? Remember that thing is coming. It's like when we see you in the morning, aloha, right? Oh, the first thing is you're still breathing, right on, right? And you're on this side. I didn't wake up and you're on the other side, and now we got a lot of preparation to do, right? It's like, she was so lovely, right? All of that, right? So the word aloha is an interesting word, right? For us, it's like, it's pointing at reminding us, almost like Bushido and the code. If you remember one day, you'll draw your last breath, then you appreciate each sunrise, right? Each moonrise, each star rise, each moment in the day as you're moving through. One day, aloha, right? It's like one day, the last breath, right? And we'll sit and watch. And in that last breath, when you leave, does the spirit return to the Sky Father? Does the air join back to the Sky Father? The water evaporate and return to the woman that is the sea and the cycle? Does the body break down and become the Earth Mother again? Are the bones then replanted and remineral the earth and becoming again the great grandmother, traveling that far distance, encapsulated in the earth, in the stone, waiting for the recreation, right? As the woman that is the sea, right? So the whole cosmology then plays back into that cycle of creation, recreation, right? And honors both principles, but tracks through the natural, right? Tracks through the water and the mitochondria. A final word on that and gender equity. Gosh, the clitoris is like a really giant penis, or the penis is like a really small clitoris external to the body instead of internalized. And so we have no ocean within our abdomen where we can recreate the next human being. We have a couple of mammary glands that are completely ineffective. Which gender is the mutation and which gender is the actual species, right? If you look at it. So we tend to think of the males and their role as a large-headed sergeant ant in the colony, right? It's got like one job. That's if an intruder tries to attack ant colony, those little big-headed ones rush to that little hole and defend the colony no matter what. And they're, in some respects, disposable, right? Because they're not like the queen. They're not recreating the next generation. They're not part of the cycle or the nursing, component of the hive but rather the defensive component of the hive. So there's a bit of that perspective into our gender actualization, right? The men are from an early age raised to serve their grandmothers, right, in the grandmother's circle, and understand that their primary job is defending the children and the women and the old people and the nest. The women are actually the purveyors of daily life and, the hunter-gatherers and the ones that understand farming and facilitating. We always divided the responsibility. So going to sea or hunting or fishing was the men's work because it required leaving, for X amount of days and then coming back with your catch or whatever. And sometimes Billy came back, sometimes not, right? In which case grandma said, here's the next Billy, train him and put him on a boat and go out and get more food, right? And then the women were closer at home and taking care of the agriculture and were closer to understanding the cycle of the water, the rain, because they're looking at the plant life and how that's interacting with the water, moving through the hydrology of the soil, moving through the root system. So all of our descriptions about Hawaiian culture and life fit into either the water cycle or the plant cycle. For example, we call a family oha, but it's really na. Oha is the Hawaiian word for the root of a tree. Na means belonging to, like mahi. So oha means you belong to the root of this tree, right? You belong to this family, right? The word ku means to stand, and mu is kind of an old civilization, but that's another story for another podcast. We'll get into that sometime. But kumu is the trunk of the tree. It also is our word for teacher, right? The teacher in the family. So the trunk of the tree is leading the leaves of the tree, the individual leaf we consider us, right? No two leaves the same, right? Ever in creation. So the individual leaves are connected to the branches and the trunk of the tree, the teaching, back to the oha, to the root that is grounded within the earth mother and understands all the other trees and the interplay. So even the way we talk about ourselves or our family or everything is all has to do with plants or the cycle of water or how it moves, so naka means the leaves shaking in the wind, and we call the people kanaka, the leaves that shake in the wind. And I think that's a reference to our dancing and singing but I don't know. I wasn't around 2,000 years ago when they started making up all this vernacular. I just inherited it from aunties and grandparents. So it was a very wonderful life, quite different than the life of modernity, So admittedly, there are times when I struggle. All of us have our own personal journey. And I hold really dear those memories of another life where the world was simpler, where it wasn't as convoluted, interconnected, but and the payoff. Things change. And these days, they change so quickly that if you and I just wait 60 seconds, it's a whole different world, right? 60 seconds has now become a long period of time. And we're seeing stuff in the micro, within the media, and the interrelated connect. So even things like these, sister, I think critical, right? Important for humans to share the journey, so that those drops, the ones we were talking about, they get stuck in those little ponds and aren't. So they have something to lean on that helped that journey to the sea. And we wish for all the drops that when that little drop finally returned to that great ocean, that the drop remembers who the drop is, even as it becomes one with the all. Or as other religions might have put it, know thyself that thou mayest know God, right? It's like know your own experience So when you enter the world again, cycling through, you realize your value, your independent worth to the universe. We may be nothing more than a grain of sand, but it's a fabulous grain. And you look marvelous, sister. So, there's living example of how the grains can shine and do it, really well. Such a pleasure to chat.
Such a pleasure to listen. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom. And this has been such a comprehensive journey and exploration and so many tidbits to chew on and to consider. I'm sure everyone listening has taken a lot away from this beautiful, adventure through Hawaiian
Thank you.
cosmology and your insights that you've brought. And I know that, I love you were sharing that you started your life as a Manu boy taking care of the water in the rivers. And even now you have been involved in so many water projects and you are making such a big impact in the world in that way. And I know people are going to want to know how they can get in touch with you, how they can follow you. Where do you post? Do you have a website?
Well, I'm at mkalani at kalani.com. I've been there, I don't know, maybe going on 3 decades since the 80s now. It's like that long on an email address. I think even if you look at my website, it's not one of those square pages. It's like early code, right? Because I don't really think much about changing all of that. Now,
mkalani at mkalani.com.
mkalani.com.
So if anyone would like to reach out to Kalani, that's where you can be.
And we're working on issues of community capacity building, on water reclamation, air quality, resource along coastal regions. So not just within the Pacific, although obviously that's a concern of mine, but Alaska, the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands, Louisiana, the Gulf, working with Lawrence, Kansas, Haskell Native American University, reaching out to the tribal colleges to how do we see bioregionality. So if you guys want to get involved in some serious work about how we restructure our relationship, with each other, I so welcome the company. I mean, all of us are, on this canoe, right? It's going to take all hands to fix everything. And so you might want to check out Olo Foundation, Olohana. It's a 501c3 that I started years ago to work with community capacity building. And I'm no longer the executive director or on the board or anything, because I'm kind of the old guy who just makes snide remarks to them. And in fact, it's being run by these wonderful young people in their 30s and 20s who really have taken on the responsibility of reacting to climate change, of social justice, environmental justice, addressing the problems just politically, but for real on the field around nutrition of food, farming of the government, understanding the water cycle, how it impacts human life, right? All of this. So it's not frivolous when we say, if you feel like getting in touch, there's always room. We always say in Hawaiian, cut the fish one more time. There's always enough for everybody, right? This is not a difficult thing, right? Sharing. It's something we teach 5-year-olds.
Well, thank you so much for the good work that you're doing in the world. And thank you for putting the call out. This is one of the most important things that we can do as human beings, is to serve and to give back. And it really is our responsibility as human drops of water to steward the waters. And it's one of the reasons why we're here, is to keep the water cycle going. And that really is a personal calling for everyone. So I hope someone who's hearing this podcast will reach out and get in touch to see what they can do to be a part of the water cycle in these ways. And I just want to thank you again,
Isabel.
so much, Kalani.
Thank you. I mean, you make my heart sing. No, it's like when I do the transition, there are still others coming behind who understand the focus and realize that we're all in this together. There's got to be better ways of behaving and better ways of being with each other in the water.
Well, when water awakens, we awaken. And there's a massive worldwide awakening to the wisdom of water happening now.
Yes, ma'am. On a final note, the drought that the world seems to be experiencing as we move to this climate change, I think quite a bit of it is related to the diminishing magnetic field, right? What's happening as a solar event and the atmosphere expanding just a little. So the water we think of as missing from the cycle is not missing. It's just translated into the air, into the gaseous form. So, a lot of our new approaches are going to be around air extraction. You go get the water where the water is. We used to dig in the ground and try to make wells and abuse surface water. Now the water's in the air. So we need to be a little bit smarter about how we harvest potable water. And in that thinking, a little bit smarter about what we're leaving in the atmosphere, like the PFAs and we need to, as human beings, get a little handle on all of this.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see the direction that atmospheric water generators go in the coming decade.
Absolutely. And Isabel, for keeping such a focus on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody who listens. Blessing on all, and have a wonderful life.
And as always, be well and stay hydrated.
Yeah.
Friends, if you're loving what you're learning on the podcast and you want to dive deeper, check out the courses, webinars, workbooks, and private coaching available at waterislife.academy. These are on-demand, lifetime access programs where we dive into brand new concepts not taught here on the podcast. And if you're ready to optimize your water to be a healthy wellspring of hydration, discover the water alchemy tools that are available at waterislife.shop. And let's connect on Instagram at JenIsabelFriend. I look forward to seeing you there. Stay hydrated and be well.